Ohio State's dramatic comeback win over Penn State 39-38 shook up the Big Ten. It has possibly shaken up the college football playoff race and also the Heisman race. Mark Rogers TV talking Heisman. I used to do this on a fairly regular basis. Haven't talked Heisman here in 2017, but maybe we'll address it a little bit more down the stretch. I have looked at the contenders. I've considered yesterday's action, of course, and I am going to unscientifically handicap the Heisman race following yesterday's action. I believe J.T. Barrett has snuck into the lead, coming out of almost nowhere, not statistically, but based on national perception. He had the one game against Oklahoma in the spotlight, and he didn't look good. He didn't look abysmal or awful. He went 19 for 35 for about 200 yards with an interception. Didn't play well on the big stage in that one game, but overall, he has had an amazing season. And then, of course, he's got the statement game against Penn State. 33 of 39, 328 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Beyond the numbers, you had to watch it play out. He ran for almost 100 yards. He accounted for over 400 yards of total offense, and he pulled out a game in which his team trailed against the number 2 team in the country by 18 points on 2 occasions, 15 in the fourth quarter, and the throws were precise. They were on target in the clutch. J.T. Barrett won the biggest game on the national stage this season thus far. Hit 16 consecutive passes to close out the game in a dramatic 39-38 win. But J.T. Barrett has had an outstanding season overall against the likes of Army, UNLV, Rutgers, Nebraska, Indiana, Maryland. Yes, we know. 25 touchdowns, 1 interception, 70% completion percentage for J.T. Barrett. The one bad game, not awful game against OU. What he has coming on down the stretch are 3 marquee games. On the road against Iowa, the Hawkeyes can be extremely difficult defensively. He's got Michigan State. He's got Michigan on the road as well. 3 very good, not great defenses. Maybe Michigan can rally and become a great defense, but burned against Penn State, of course, last week. J.T. Barrett has to make it to the college football playoff for his Heisman candidacy to make it all the way through and gain him another win for Ohio State. The Buckeyes and USC are the top Heisman schools going into 2017. J.T. Barrett, if you believe in career awards, a la Ron Dayne in 1999, maybe the voters sentimentally pick J.T. Barrett, the redshirt senior, who has now eclipsed Drew Brees as the all-time touchdown leader passing in the Big Ten. He already owns the all-time touchdown record accounted for. J.T. Barrett at number 1 will give him a 30% chance of winning the Heisman at this point. Closely behind, still considered to be the best player in college football, the eyeball test says Saquon Barkley is the best player, and this is supposed to go to the best player. But there are circumstances involved. His stats are good. They're not great. You might be surprised if you look at Saquon Barkley's statistics. They are not Heisman worthy. He has 3 100-yard rushing games this season. 1 was against Akron. He's run for 800 yards, 5.8 per carry. You can scan the nation and find running backs for almost every team averaging 5.8 yards per carry. He's got 9 touchdowns. It's not like he's got 20 touchdowns. But he's an all-purpose back. He also has 3 touchdowns receiving on 36 catches. And we saw what he does in the return game with the big 97-yarder against Ohio State to open the game. He has the amazing game, the amazing performance at Iowa with 305 yards from scrimmage. Now, had Penn State beat Ohio State, even if Barkley, with the awful game that he had against the Buckeyes, had the marquee win and game against Iowa that would have led them to the Big Ten Championship and college football playoff appearance, then that Iowa game would have stood out as his Heisman moment. But he lost his Heisman moment because the Nittany Lions lost the game. And even though the quarterbacks are more credited and blamed for the wins and losses, this is going to keep Saquon Barkley out of the spotlight going down the stretch. An abysmal game against the Buckeyes. Not necessarily his fault. The offensive line dominated by the Buckeyes' defensive line. But 44 yards rushing on 21 carries. And listen to this stat. It's amazing. On Saquon Barkley's last 9 carries against Ohio State, He had negative 17 yards. All right. He's the best all-purpose back in the country, a la Christian McCaffrey, who couldn't even win this award, and McCaffrey's numbers dwarf Saquon Barkley's this season. He doesn't have any real monumental games left. The biggest marquee game left for Saquon Barkley's next week at Michigan State. We'll give him a 20% chance of winning the Heisman. Also, Baker Mayfield planted the flag. Some voters will be irked by that. Some will be energized by that. That's his statement for the year, winning at Ohio State. And if the Buckeyes go on to the Big Ten championship, that's going to be to Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield's credit that they knocked off one of the best teams in the country. And Baker Mayfield has no bad games on his resume. Yes, they lost to Iowa State, but he's putting up numbers every week and he's not making mistakes. 73% passer, 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 27 total touchdowns for Baker Mayfield. He's got meaningful games left against Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia down the stretch. He only plays one game against Kansas that will be off the national radar. Otherwise, 3 good opponents down the stretch for Oklahoma. Against Ohio State, again, lights out, 27 of 35, 386 yards, 3 TDs, no picks, and the planting of the flag, which the human element says is going to weigh into the hearts and minds of some voters, not many, but some voters. Had it come later in the season, maybe a few more. Maybe he gets the career award a la Ron Dane, and we mentioned that with J.T. Barrett as well. All right. Josh Adams, Notre Dame, burst onto the scene. Eye-popping numbers at 9 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns, 1,169 rushing yards. Has done his best work now that Notre Dame's in the spotlight. 191 yards against USC, 202 yesterday against NC State. His only one bad game against a formidable Georgia defense, 19 carries, 53 yards. But if Notre Dame makes it to the college football playoff, and he could have a spotlight game in the final weekend against Stanford. He also has a game against Miami. And because of the contract with NBC, Josh Adams is going to have a national game on his last 4 tries. He needs a highlight, though, a national stage moment to thrust him into the lead. That, again, could come against Miami. It could come against Stanford. And if the perception is he has carried Notre Dame to the college football playoff, that could spin him into the lead. I got Josh Adams right now as a 15% shot of winning the Heisman. Bryce Love at 10%. It was mentioned a number of times during the broadcast of Stanford's 15-14 win against lowly Oregon State that might have been Bryce Love's best statement for winning the Heisman, because the Stanford offense has been on a roll, largely attributed to Bryce Love. 1,386 rushing yards, 10-plus yards per carry, 10.3 and 11 touchdowns. Against Oregon State, Stanford could only run for 81 yards, 222 total yards in a narrow, gifted 15-14 win. He's got his big chance as a 2-loss team that may get to the Pac-12 championship game, but most likely with the Pac-12 left out of the college football playoff, he's going to be a bit in the back seat nationally, but he's got the one game against Notre Dame that may ruin the Irish's chance to get to a college football playoff, and Stanford's got that slim chance of doing it themselves. And then possibly a Pac-12 championship game for Bryce Love. Okay, here's your wild card. His name is KHALIL Tate. He didn't basically play the first 4 games of the season. Against Colorado, Arizona's quarterback Brandon Dawkins left injured. Tate came into the game, ran for a quarterback record, FBS record-setting 327 yards. Since then, he has stolen the job and run away with it, literally. His rushing performances the last 4 weeks, 327, 230, 167, and 146 with 8 rushing touchdowns. He's also thrown it well. He spins it at 70% rate since he has taken over the starting job with 6 touchdowns. He had a 12 for 13 day on his first outing against Colorado. Consider this. In the past month, the month of October, KHALIL Tate ran for 840 yards. That's more than any player, any position has run for in 10 years in college football. And these are not meaningless stats. It's not the Arizona of 2016 that went 3-9 and 1-8 in the Pac-12. This kid has lifted this team on his back, and now Arizona is in the division race to get to the Pac-12 championship game. They're 6-2. They're 4-1 in the Pac-12, winning these 4 consecutive games that KHALIL Tate has started. They take on USC at the Coliseum. Most likely the winner of that game will go to the Pac-12 championship game. Imagine if KHALIL Tate, coming off a 1-8 season for Arizona, takes over the starting job in Week 4, sets a number of rushing records, leads Arizona to the Pac-12 championship game, and who knows, maybe pulls off an upset against the likes of Washington, Washington State, or Stanford. KHALIL Tate, 4-time Pac-12 Player of the Week. 4 out of the 5 weeks he's played. There you go. I'll give him a 5% chance of being the wild card winner of the Heisman Trophy. That leaves the final 5% for the field, led by Mason Rudolph, Jalen Hurts, and Jonathan Taylor of Wisconsin. Hopefully Taylor is fine after leaving the game against Illinois with an injury. Mark Rogers TV, talking college football, talking Heisman Trophy. If you love the game of college football, you got to subscribe to my YouTube channel, where we talk to the best bloggers and broadcasters in the industry, including some analysis from myself as well. We invite you to leave some comments and questions and suggestions. We get to as many as possible, and certainly love to see the discussion that you start amongst yourselves in discussing and debating college football right here on Mark Rogers TV.